Hello, Ambassadors. Today is our second lesson in a series of studies that I've called Four Weddings and a Funeral. Last week we took a look at a bride worth waiting for, the story in Genesis 29 of Jacob and his father-in-law Laban, and of course his two wives, Rachel and Leah. Today we're looking at a text you've probably never heard a sermon or class on, the Song of Solomon, or otherwise called the Song of Songs. I'm recording it in advance of our Zoom class on August 9 in case you want to do some further review or study, or in case you'd like to share it with others to invite them to join our ambassador study. Most preachers and teachers avoid Song of Solomon or Song of Songs because we don't quite know what to do with it. Solomon, of course, was David's son. He presided over the royal court in Jerusalem. And this Song of Solomon is what's called an epithalamium, or a nuptial song. It's an expression of love between a bride and her bridegroom. Biblical scholars have debated whether the song should be read figuratively or literally. Many Jewish and Christian scholars have interpreted this poetic expression of human physical love as a historical relationship that could also be interpreted as a divine parable. Let's look at the text. Song of Solomon chapter 6, verses 4 to 12. You'll notice that parts are labeled he, and parts are labeled she, and parts are labeled friends. And those are designed to tell us who is speaking in each of the sections that we read. So he starts off with this. You are as beautiful as Tirzah, my darling, as lovely as Jerusalem, as majestic as troops with banners. Turn your eyes from me, they overwhelm me. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep coming up from the washing. Each has its twin, not one of them is missing. Your temples behind your veil are like the halves of a pomegranate. 60 queens there may be, and 80 concubines, and virgins beyond number. But my dove, my perfect one, is unique, the only daughter of her mother, the favorite of the one who bore her. The young women saw her and called her blessed. The queens and concubines praised her. Then the friends speak. Who is this that appears like the dawn, fair as the moon, bright as the sun, majestic as the stars in procession? And he says this, I went down to the grove of nut trees to look at the new growth in the valley, to see if the vines had budded or if the pomegranates were in bloom. Before I realized it, my desire set me among the royal chariots of my people. What is that all about? Well, Song of Solomon is an example of poetry that's called wasif, W-A-S-F. It's an ancient Near Eastern style of poetry that's descriptive verse. A wasif love poem describes and praises each part of a lover's body, one part at a time, using exotic, extravagant, or even far-fetched metaphors. And Song of Solomon is probably the best-known example of wasif poetry from the Near East. Ancient Jewish scholars often regarded the story as a picture of Yahweh and his love for Israel. According to early church fathers such as Augustine, Origen, Jerome, and Bernard of Clairvaux, the song revealed the love between Christ and his church. As dissatisfaction with these allegorical interpretations grew, evangelical scholars adopted the more literal reading as primary. So Song of Solomon was viewed as extolling human sexuality within the bounds of marriage, with a secondary application to Christ and the church, his bride. It's a neglected book in our Bibles. It's the last one in the Old Testament section we call the books of poetry. The title given for this book is Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. This is often shortened to Song of Solomon or Song of Songs. Some translations use the title Canticles, which is another way of referring to songs. The book is a challenge to understand because it's poetic dialogue with various speakers, and the speakers are not identified as they would be if one were reading, say, a play by Shakespeare. We can assume that the male lead in this poetic drama is King Solomon, but it's difficult to pinpoint a time and place in that man's life where this book fits. Solomon was the third king of Israel, reigning about 970 to 930 BC, the son of David. His wealth and his accomplishments were amazing. He was the builder of the great temple of the Lord in Jerusalem, as well as lavish palaces and estates for his own pleasure. Solomon's life included having 700 wives and 300 concubines, 1 Kings 11:3. The book of the Bible at issue today pictures his relationship, or at least his attempted relationship, with one woman, a shepherd girl, according to Song of Songs 1 verse 8. The story behind the poetry seems to be that the king has fallen in love with this shepherdess and he wants to bring her to his palace as a wife, but she pines for a boyfriend from her home village. Question 1. How would you explain the gist of the Song of Solomon to someone unfamiliar with the Bible? I suppose more interpretations have been proposed for this song than any other biblical book. An early popular approach was to interpret the book as an allegory. In Judaism, one interpretation was that the man represents God and the woman represents Israel. In Christianity, they would say the man represents Christ and the woman symbolizes the church. The absence of any indication that it's an allegory or any identification of these symbols with the problematic nature of consistent application argue against this approach. For example, the woman rouses the man, Song of Solomon 8 verse 5. In what way does the church rouse Christ? Another popular approach sees the book as a drama. Interpretations adopting this approach suggest that there are three main characters: the poor but noble shepherd, the scheming King Solomon, and the virtuous shepherdess. Several difficulties arise with this interpretation. King Solomon plays no active role. He never speaks, if that were the case. Given the fact that this is attributed to Solomon in Song of Solomon 1:1, why would the song portray him in such a negative light? Further, there's no agreement on an overall plot for this drama. While some mini-dramas occur, for example, Song of Solomon chapter 3 verses 1 to 5 and chapter 5 verses 2 to 8, the man and the woman start each main section apart and then reunite. I think it's preferable to interpret the song as romantic love poetry. Love poetry doesn't tell a story, but it's descriptive. The song is the most richly metaphoric book in the Bible. Some see the work as an anthology of separate love poems. That seems unlikely given the complex interplay of word pictures, phrases, and themes throughout every part of the song. Although Egyptian and other contemporary love poetry tend toward shorter poems than the song, its 117 verses don't make it too long to form a unified and beautiful romantic poem. One of the earliest commentators, and certainly the most influential in the song, was Origen of Alexandria. He wrote this, quote, "I advise everyone who is not yet rid of the vexations of the flesh and blood and has not ceased to feel the passions of this bodily nature to refrain from reading the book and the things that will be said about it." And that's the end of his quote. In other words, what he's saying is, anyone who's still struggling with natural bodily passions shouldn't read this book. Well, Augustine's perspective has been prevalent ever since he advocated it. And his perspective was that sex was only to be engaged in for begetting children. Procreation was positive, but passion and pleasure of procreation was negative. I take Song of Solomon as being a description of God's view of sex, love, and marriage. Question 2. Do you think most Christians think physical love within marriage is a good thing, or that we would be more spiritual if we were not interested in sex? I like the quote by Matthew Henry when he comments on this book. He says, "When we apply ourselves to the study of this book, we must forget that we have bodies." Really? Says who? Certainly not the Bible. I mean, when we open the Bible, we don't find a separation of body from soul or matter from spirit or godly purity from physical passion. There's no devaluing of the human body. Think of the incarnation. Think of the bodily resurrection. There's no belittling of sensual delights. Think of Jesus celebrating a wedding by providing his miraculous wine. There's no dichotomy between spirituality and sexuality, between loving God with heart, soul, and loving one's wife with heart and flesh. with eyes and hands and the rest of your body. That's what the Song of Songs brings to the table. And thank God. Thank God that the answer to the question, what do you think of the human body, is, it is good. And thank God the answer to the question, what do you make of physical pleasure within marriage, is no different. Both bodily beauty and pure passion are very good. That's what God says. Question 3. Do you think men would be more godly if they did not enjoy the beauty of the female body? But bodily beauty and pure passion are two clear themes in our text. We begin with bodily beauty. My core idea for that theme is this. All of creation, especially the beauty of the human body, points to the beauty of the Lord our Creator. So by saying bodily beauty, I ultimately have God in mind. I want to arouse your affections toward Him by looking at her, the beautiful bride of Solomon's song. The Bible's a very balanced book. It warns about the demise and danger of beauty. The demise, beauty is vain, Proverbs 31:30. The danger, do not desire the adulterous woman's beauty in your heart, and do not let her capture you with her eyelashes, Proverbs 6:25. But the Bible also notes and highly values beauty, especially feminine beauty. Abraham's wife Sarah was a woman beautiful in appearance, Genesis 12:11. She was very beautiful, Genesis 12:14. Isaac's wife Rebekah was also very beautiful, Genesis 24:16. Other women in the Bible who were called beautiful include Rachel, Abigail, Tamar, Esther, and the daughters of Job. So, biblically speaking, beauty is like a cut rose. It's worth beholding even though you know it's withering away. It's worth beholding even though its thorns can prick. It's worth beholding because the flower's beauty in that moment points to the beauty not of Mother Nature, but of Father God. As Bible-believing Christians, we must not lose an aesthetic element to our faith. The Bible is neither hostile to nor dismissive of beauty. It recognizes and extols it, and nowhere more than in the Song of Songs, where beauty is everywhere, as Leland Ryken notes, in the exalted poetry, in the pictures of nature, and even in the attractiveness the lovers find in each other's bodies. Bodily beauty. Question 4. Scan over the Song of Solomon as a whole. How many occurrences of the word beautiful can you see? What is described as beautiful? The word beautiful is an important word in the song. It occurs 14 times in the book, more than in any other book of the Bible. In all the descriptions the man and his friends give of his bride, they say things like, "You are beautiful," Song 6 verse 4, or "How beautiful," chapter 7 verse 1, or they address her as the most beautiful of women, chapter 6 verse 1. And what is so beautiful? Her eyes, her hair, her teeth, her cheeks, her feet, her legs, her navel, her belly, her breasts. Those are all body parts, right? And so the point is, her body is beautiful. Song of Solomon 6 verse 5, the Message puts it this way: "Your beauty is too much for me. I'm in over my head. I'm not used to this. I can't take it in." Now, with such a large section in front of us, I'm not going to unpack each image, especially those we've already seen, but I do want to make a couple of summarizing observations from Song of Solomon chapter 6 verses 4 to 10. And that is, Solomon gives a full body view. Now, he doesn't cover every imaginable body part. For example, he doesn't talk about her left earlobe, but he does cover her from feet to face with an emphasis on her facial features. That's likely because the face is a person's most distinctive feature, and it physically represents someone's personality. Notice that in the Wasif, he gives the most intimate inventory. He focuses on her face, but he also features what's between the face and the feet. He features her breasts, her thighs, her navel, her belly. Those are body parts that only a husband would see in the ancient Near Eastern culture, and that only a husband should see in our culture, and certainly in the church. So it's a comprehensive and intimate description. The second thing you want to see is that the imagery he uses is sensory and symbolic. Now, Let me point out, this is a matter of kind of awkward compliments. The two lovers in Song of Songs praise each other's bodies with words that were considered compliments at the time, but they sound strange to today's readers. So look at some of the affectionate words that they shared. He describes her temples as being like halves of a pomegranate, her hair like being a royal tapestry, her nose like a tower. How many women would like to have their noses compared to a tower? Her teeth are like a flock of sheep, and he says everyone has its twin, like sheep coming up from the washing, everyone with its twin. Does that sound very complimentary to you? It doesn't so much to me, but I'm sure she liked it. He talks about her neck being like the Tower of David, her breasts like clusters of fruit, her waist like a mound of wheat. Women, how would you like to be told that your waist looks like a mound of wheat? Well, think about it. What he's describing is that hourglass shape of wheat, the way it used to be bound together in the old days, not the way we roll up wheat today. And then he talks about her legs being like jewels. When she describes him, she talks about his head being the purest gold, his eyes like doves, his lips like lilies, his cheeks like beds of spice, his arms like rods of gold, his body like polished ivory, his legs are pillars of marble, his feet are bases of pure gold. I don't know about you folks, but I think the compliments she gave him seemed to be a little bit more complimentary than the ones he paid her. But I think in their day that she probably liked just fine being told that her teeth were like a flock of sheep. Question 5. How important is it in Christian marriage that couples keep themselves looking nice? Willard Harley, in his book Fall in Love, Stay in Love, talks about love units. And he talks about them like this. Love units are either added to your account with your spouse or they're withdrawn from your account by the things you do that are either good or bad, respectively. And so when he talks about love units, he talks about things that increase your spouse's love for you. And when he talks about taking away those units, he talks about things that decrease your spouse's love for you. Well, for many people, physical attractiveness can be one of the greatest sources of these love units. If you have this need, an attractive person will not only get your attention, but may distract you from whatever it was you were doing. In fact, that may have been what drew you to your spouse in the first place, his or her physical attractiveness. I mean, think about our lesson from last week, Jacob and Rachel, or even before that, Isaac and Rebekah. Song of Solomon 4:1 says, "Behold, you are beautiful, my love, you are beautiful." Now, there are some people who consider this need for attractiveness temporary and important only at the beginning of a relationship. Some people feel like after a couple gets to know each other better, physical attractiveness should take a back seat to the more deeper and intimate needs. I've even heard some people suggest that those with a need for physical attractiveness are immature or spiritually weak, even subhuman. I don't know if you've noticed it, but a lot of men, when we get married, tend to let ourselves go to pot. And a lot of women, when they get married, tend to try to keep themselves looking young and vibrant. I'm not trying to judge important emotional needs, and you shouldn't either. But the question we should ask is, what need, when met, deposits the most love units into our account with our spouse? If physical attractiveness is important, it shouldn't be ignored. For many, the need for physical attractiveness is something that's not present just at the beginning of a relationship, but throughout marriage. And whenever the spouse is seen as being attractive, love units are deposited. Among the various aspects of physical attractiveness, weight generally gets the most attention. Almost all the complaints you hear about a spouse's loss of physical attractiveness refer to being overweight. When diet and exercise bring the spouse back to a healthy size, attractiveness almost always returns. However, there are things like clothing and hairstyle and makeup and personal hygiene and all of those things that come together to make a person attractive. But since, as we say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, you're the ultimate judge of what's attractive to you. If the attractiveness of your spouse makes you feel great, and loss of that attractiveness would make you feel frustrated, then physical attractiveness should be on the list of the important needs. Question 6. Can we work too hard at physical beauty? Take a look at 1 Peter 3, verses 3 and 4. We're familiar with that text. As Peter says to women, your beauty should not come from outward adornment such as braided hair and the wearing of gold jewelry and fine clothes. Instead, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. Is it wrong to have a desire to look nice? No. Are women required to walk around looking at the ground all the time? Absolutely not. The point of these verses is not that women should do their best to look frumpy and unattractive. It's, however, to point out that being well-dressed and expensively adorned are completely pointless if inner beauty is absent. You see, it's possible to be neatly and stylishly attired and still be modest. Your makeup and your jewelry can be applied neatly and with good taste, but it should not be done in such a way that draws unnecessary attention to yourself. Your purpose is to be godly, to draw people to Jesus. And you and I do this by walking so closely with Him that His beauty is reflected in us. All our designer clothes and expensive accessories are worthless, even their artificial beauty, if Christ's love is not radiating through our entire being. So we need to get our priorities straight. Be sure our heart is beautiful, and external attractiveness is sure to follow. Question 7. Song of Solomon 6, verses 4 to 12. What is the emotion of this passage? I think when you put the images all together, the word that best describes the picture is hubba hubba. I mean, the whole point of this picture is that Solomon's bride is unique and awesome, and her uniqueness is highlighted in verses 8 and 9 of chapter 6. 60 queens there may be, and 80 concubines, and virgins beyond number. But my dove, my perfect one, is unique, the only daughter of her mother, the favorite of the one who bore her. The young women saw her and called her blessed. The queens and concubines praised her. They all see what he sees. She outshines them all in bodily beauty. Every lady agrees with this man's assessment. In my eyes, she's the sweetest lady I ever looked on. She's unique. She's awesome. Question 8. A key theme in this book is beauty. What is God's purpose in beauty? God could have created a world devoid of beauty. Why do you think God created beauty? In our text, the groom uses sensory and symbolic imagery to give a comprehensive and intimate description, a full body view of his bride as unique and awesome. And that's my summary on this section on bodily beauty. But let's not stop there. Let's think theologically about this theme. What's the purpose of beauty, bodily beauty, or any beauty we might witness in creation? Giovanni Leone got it right, but overstated it when he said, the strongest evidence to prove that God exists is a beautiful woman. Well, more broadly and biblically, I would say it this way. All creation, especially the beauty of the human body, points to the beauty of the Lord, our Creator. Now, how can I say that? I say it because Paul said it. In Romans 1, verses 18 to 25, he taught that when people look at creation, they're to look up in gratitude to God and acknowledge Him as the Creator. Because he said, what can be known about God is plain. Since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. So it follows that when we look upon the beauty of the human body, we should look beyond the image of God to God. According to Genesis, humans are the pinnacle of divine creation, because only humans, soul and body, are the image of God. There's something of God's divine glory and beauty that's imparted to each of us. Now that fact is emphasized in that the second person of the Godhead didn't become a stone or a plant or a donkey or a penguin or a petunia or wind or water. He didn't become the North Star or a black hole. He became a man. And ironically, the most amazing part of the incarnation was that God would become a man. That he who had no form or majesty that we should look at him, no beauty that we should desire him, he became just like one of us. Richard Hess writes this: "A proper recovery of an aesthetic theology lies in the appreciation of the incarnation and the ultimate exhibition of Christ on the cross, at once a terrible and horrifying spectacle, and yet also the sacrifice of love that transcends all other forms as the most beautiful and desirable subject the world has ever known." Question 9. Song of Solomon 6, 11, and 12. What is this talking about? Up till now we've been talking about the theme of bodily beauty. And the human body can be beautiful, and we need to acknowledge that. If we're married, we need to try to make ourselves as attractive to our spouses as possible. But when you get to verses 11 and 12, we're talking about pure passion. That's the theme. And what you'll find is when you look at the new translations, that the translators have tried to identify who the speakers are in each of the sections. In the New International Version, for example, you'll see the word he and then some text. And then you'll see the word she and some text. And then you'll see the word friends and some text. It's like reading a play. Who is speaking at each time? Some other translations have taken some other ways of doing this. The old New International Version used to refer to the lover and the beloved. And other translations have used other meanings, but the idea is still the same. Who is speaking, he or she? Well, when you get to Song of Solomon 6, verses 11 and 12, there's not really a consensus about who's speaking or who's speaking in which verse. The New International Version and the Net Bible, for example, look at those verses and say these are verses that depict what the man is saying. I went down to the grove of nut trees to look at the new growth in the valley to see if the vines had budded or the pomegranates were in bloom. Before I realized it, my desire set me among the royal chariots of my people. Other translations, the New Living Translation, the Christian Standard Bible, the New King James Version, the English Standard Version, take this as something she says. She is the one speaking and overcome by passion. So is it he that's overcome by passion, as the New International and the Net Bible say, or is it she that's overcome by passion, as these other translations suggest? I even came across one commentator who suggested that what's going on is this. In verse 11, she is coming on to him, and in verse 12, he has been turned on by her. Well, what's the point here? You know it's a tough nut to crack when commentators who are unanimous on nearly nothing in the Song of Solomon are unanimous that the Song of Solomon 6 verse 12 is the most difficult in the song and one of the most difficult in the Old Testament to make sense of. And you know it's difficult when one of the most prominent wisdom literature scholars, Roland Murphy, says it has resisted all attempts at translation. However, you can find enough pieces of the puzzle here to fit them together to form a picture. With Song of Solomon 6 verses 11 and 12, what's going on is a woman is deeply desiring her husband, and he is deeply desiring her, and that's what moves them toward each other. Whatever the explanation of this text, it's about pure passion. Question 10. What's the application of the passage? Well, I think there are two big ideas from the Song of Solomon, and I'd encourage you to read the book. And the two big ideas are these. First, Christians should keep themselves looking nice. God cares about physical beauty, and so we need to make ourselves attractive to our spouses. And the second is, sex in marriage is good. Good Christians should have a good sex life. Well, that's my brief review of this part, at least, of Song of Solomon. I hope it's been helpful to you, and I hope you'll look into it some more. Maybe read the book sometime when you have an opportunity. It's only 117 verses long. Next week, we'll talk about the book of Hosea, chapter 1, as we talk about Hosea's promiscuous bride. But in the meantime, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.